With all of the backlash against Amazon's Rings of Power series, one thing that's coming out just a week before that people have looked at and have been critical of, though not nearly as much as they have been with the Lord of the Rings show, is the new HBO Game of Thrones spinoff, the Game of Thrones prequel, House of the Dragon. And it's been very obvious from the way it's been promoted, the way the actors have talked about it, the way the showrunners have talked about it, that they want to distance themselves from Game of Thrones, at least the finale, and a lot of things associated with the original Game of Thrones series. House of the Dragon showrunners reveal Game of Thrones spinoff written with focus on addressing accusations of racism and sexism against the original series. And we continue to hear that from the actors as well, that they're going to take it a step forward with this. They're going to get more progressive with this one. HBO's House of Dragons prequel, Goes Woke, will explore internalized misogyny and patriarchy. I think that's obvious if you look at the way they're promoting it, that it is going to be that way. And that George R.R. Martin, the person who doesn't care about his integrity, who's lied to his fans over and over again about actually finishing his books, he's going to go right along with it because he doesn't want to be viewed as a racist or a sexist. He doesn't want to be canceled. He just wants to continue to make money with these series on HBO. And in fact, now he's coming out and he's distancing himself from what came before. He's distancing himself from the disaster that was Game of Thrones Season 8. Game of Thrones creator George R.R. Martin reveals showrunners declined his input in original series' last 4 seasons. I was pretty much out of the loop, says George R.R. Martin. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because, as we all know, they got to a point in Game of Thrones where they didn't have the books anymore, right? They no longer were up to the books, so they were relying on George R.R. Martin and what he told them would happen, but they didn't have all this dialogue. They didn't have all these things that he had already written. But George R.R. Martin said he was going to focus on the book, so he wasn't going to be as involved in the series. Well, inherently, you're taking yourself out of the picture by that, George, when you said you're not going to write the scripts for season 6, 7, or 8 because you wanted to work on Winds of Winter, which still hasn't released. Even though you promised time and time again when it would be out, that book is nowhere close to being finished. And the truth probably is the backlash to the way that Game of Thrones ended is scaring him from actually putting out his stuff because maybe now he has to rewrite everything because of the reaction to it. So now, once again, George R.R. Martin is trying to pass the blame. Game of Thrones author George R.R. Martin's revealed the last 4 seasons of his work were produced almost entirely without his input. By that point, he had been left out of the loop by series showrunners Dave Benioff and D.B. Weiss. And I have no love for those guys at all. But it's clear that they took the outline that George gave them, and that's what they made it with. Because George hasn't written the books yet, and he refused to actually write the scripts. Speaking to an admission made by Game of Thrones prequels co-showrunner Ryan Condal in the same interview, they heavily relied on Martin's insight. The author noted that their working partnership was much the opposite of his with Benioff and Weiss in the later seasons. By season 5 and 6, and certainly 7, 8, I was pretty much out of the loop. How crazy that you're trying to say this now in retrospect, after there's been such a bad reaction to it. Asked by New York Times media reporter John Coblin if he had any ideas, he says, I don't know, you have to ask Dan and Dave. And they declined to comment on what he said. Martin's depiction of a degrading partnership between him, Benioff, and Weiss echoes a similar recollection put forward by one of his representatives. The first 5 seasons stuck to George's roadmap, then they went off George's roadmap. And I inherently push back on this because it's very well known that they sat down, and George even said this, right? Last year, Dan and I went out to Santa Fe. This is in 2014, bro. This is in 2014. Last year, Dan and I went out to Santa Fe for a week to sit down with Martin and talk through where things are going because we don't know if we're going to catch up and where exactly we would be. If you know the ending, you can lay the groundwork. So they did all that. They sat down with George and laid the groundwork. But when that wasn't very well received, and of course I think it was poorly done, could probably be done better in the books, now George R.R. Martin is saying something else. In 2015, this man said this. He's not going to script an episode for season 6 in order to focus on finishing the still unreleased next book, Winds of Winter. Writing a script takes me 3 weeks, and really it would cost me more time than that since I've never been good at changing gears. Writing a season 6 script would cost me a month's work on Winds, and maybe as much as 6 weeks. I cannot afford that. This motherfucker is still nowhere close to releasing Winds of Winter 7 years later. it sounds like you didn't have the time or the energy or the effort to put into that. But now George R. R. Martin is trying to distance himself from what happened with Game of Thrones Season 8. I think there's a lot of blame to pass around for sure for that disaster of a season. George R. R. Martin holds some blame there because he's the man who can't finish his story. Now he's far more focused on other things, promoting his new series that he promises, won't be as misogynistic, won't be as terrible, won't be as non-PC as the new House of Dragons prequel. Is it going to be any good? I don't know. There's some people that say it looks great. Some people that say it looks woke as shit. Only time will tell for House of the Dragon. But one thing is sure, they're doing their best to hold on to that Game of Thrones name, but distance themselves from some of the things that actually happened in that series. Thanks for watching, everyone. And a huge shout out to my patrons. I appreciate you guys so much. Want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram? Check out the description below. You'll find links to my P.O. box and my Patreon as well. And I'll talk to you guys later.